Well, hi everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Godcast. My name is Father Alex. I'm the vicar of St Matthew's Church in Burnley, the host of the Godcast, and also the author of Our Daily Bread from Argos to the Altar, a Priest Story, which is my book, which is out now and available on Amazon and Waterstones and wherever you get your books from. So do check that out. Really looking forward to this interview that we have now for you with Scott Kyle. Scott is a very well-known actor who's appeared in shows such as Outlander and Kajaki. He's also in a wonderful play, or a play that's going to hit the road, and we'll be learning about that in the interview, and a little bit about his faith as well. So I do hope you enjoy this interview now with Scott Kyle, and if you do, then please subscribe and perhaps share it with friends and loved ones and family, and get the message out there. But for now, enjoy the Godcast with Scott Kyle. Well, I'm delighted to say that joining me on the Godcast today is Scott Kyle, and you've seen the intro, so Scott is a well-known actor and gentleman from Scotland. How are you doing, Scott?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you doing yourself?
I'm okay. I'm all right. Thanks very much for coming on the Godcast. It looks like you're parked up there. You're up in Scotland as we speak.
Yes, I am, and so I've just ran from one meeting I was having there, and this is the quiet space I could find in the car. So, here I am.
So let's start, Scott, by unashamedly plugging your play that's about to go back on the road after a bit of a sabbatical. Just tell people about this play that's been out there for some time now.
Okay, well, so first of all, if people want to find out a bit more information about the show or tour dates for it, the best place to find that is on my website, which is www.scottkyle.co.uk. So that's Scott with two T's, and it's KYLE.co.uk. So that bit means I don't forget that. So yeah, the theatre show. So a short history on it. I found the play in a library almost 2 decades ago. We started off touring it in the back room, a working men's clubs and pubs and stuff, because the theatres weren't too keen on it. Over the course of a 5-year period, we built the biggest show in Scotland. This was without any financial backing or any financial support. It was literally just me with a backpack on, putting leaflets through letterboxes until we filled the theatres. And over the course of the 5 years, the show won accolades. I won the Stage Best Actor Award at the Fringe in Edinburgh, and it went on to be Scottish theatre's greatest success story of recent times. After 5 years, the writer exercised his right to take the show back. So I lost the rights to the show. That was 13 years ago. And in recent months, just maybe 4 months ago, I was approached by the writer and said, would you like to take the play back? So it was a wee bit of trauma there and a wee bit of overcoming some of my past trauma with the show. So, but ultimately I decided to take the show on. But the premise of the show, and the reason I did take the show back, is I had a bit of unfinished business with it, and it's an incredible piece of theatre. So the show is the story of two rival football fans. So we've got Billy from the Rangers side, and we've got Tim from the Celtic side, who find themselves banged up on the morning of the Old Firm match for non-payment of fines. So they've been locked up by Harry, the jailer, the warden, who's put them in the same prison cell to make his life a bit easier, because he's got to clean the cells when he finishes his shift. He wants to get off, and he puts them in the same cell. So what happens is both of their wives have went to the local bookmakers and put every penny they have on each respective side to win. So ultimately, whoever wins the match, that's the one that their wife will collect the winnings, pay the fine, and they'll get out. But there's many twists and turns on the way to the end of the play. Not to mention that Harry, the turnkey that's locked them up, he's waiting on an important phone call about the health of his grandson. His grandson's in for a big operation. He's not too well. So as the story unfolds, Billy and Tim persuade Harry to let him watch the TV through the hatch in the prison cell. But ultimately, they get a wee insight into Harry's life as well. And it starts to build a bridge between these two men as they come together to support another human being who's having a bit of a tough time at the moment. So that's the short answer.
And it's called Singin, I'm No Billy, He's a Tim. Just explain that to people who, from Lancashire might be watching this. Like, what does this mean? What is it?
Well, Singing I'm No Billy, He's a Tim, it's actually, there's a song, and it's singing I'm No Billy, I'm a Tim, which the kind of Celtic fans would sing. So Des Dillon, when you see the play, it'll make sense. But he's done a wee play on words with the title. But also, as I said at the start, Billy represents the Rangers fans, so he's part of the Billy Boys, and Tim represents the Celtic fans as well. So there's loads of plays on words within the title of the show. But ultimately, if people are coming along, they're going to laugh an awful lot. They'll maybe be crying, they'll be singing, they'll be dancing. There's a lot goes on in the 90 minutes of the show as it unfolds, and ultimately we've got there's an anti-sectarian message all the way through the show, and a real for humanity story essentially. I've done multiple projects over the years. One of them was I was playing a soldier in a true story, and one of the things was how far the soldiers would go for their mates. Well, in this is people being able to put aside their differences for the sake of another human being. And although Des Dillon, the writer who's wrote this incredible piece of theatre, has used the vehicle of Rangers and Celtic, and in this instance it's the sectarianism between Catholic and Protestant, it could just as easily be set today, and you could put an Israeli and a Palestinian in the prison cell and play the show out. And it's about two people coming from opposite sides having to find a way to come together through the humanity towards supporting somebody else who's having a tough time. Could be Montague Capulet if you went back to Shakespeare times, and it could be Sonny Shiite. There's references in it to Croatia and Serbia as well. So there's lots in it.
So what was the initial attraction, Scott? Was it the fact that I'm guessing you're a football fan, are you? Or...
So yeah, growing up, I haven't shared a prison cell, fortunately, with anyone other than in the play. But growing up, I did share a bedroom with an older brother. So when I found the play in my local library, I graduated college as an actor, and I'd set up a production company because I thought that's the best chance to get my first job. And I found this play in the library, and I read it, and I could see the banter and the tit for tat things that were going on in the prison cell, and I just thought that's like sharing a room with my older brother. So first and foremost, I thought it was a great piece of theatre. Yep, big football fan as well. And it was something that I thought I could identify with, and a story that I felt anyone in Scotland or grown up in Scotland could definitely identify with. The nice thing about the show is it transcends just the football tops, and it transcends Scotland, because we've been to Northern Ireland with it, we've been to Republic of Ireland, we've been down to England with it, and we're meeting fans from all over the world. So America, Canada, expats are all over the world, and also Rangers and Celtic are global brands. So there's an audience for this anywhere in the world.
What do you think makes that Celtic Rangers such a hot rivalry in potato? Scott, I'm a big Burnley fan, and we have a big rivalry with Blackburn.
I'm sorry to hear that, Alice.
Well, I am at the moment, brother. Tell me about it. But we've got a big rivalry with Blackburn Rovers, and that is pretty vitriolic, and it can get quite tasty, for a better word. But and I've also had people on the Godcast. I've had Trevor Stephen on, who played for Lou McCarry, who played for Celtic, and a Burnley legend, who wasn't so much a Celtic legend, Andy Payton, came on as well, and they all talk about this kind of extraordinary. Entering an extraordinary kind of relationship between two clubs. Trevor Stephen was interesting because he didn't really know much about it before he got there, and he was like, people were encouraging him to kind of be part of it, but he kind of found it better to try and stay apart. What is it, Scott, that drives it now? I mean, because the sectarianism is, the collapse of the church in Scotland is not that, doesn't mean it's there as it was. What do you think?
I think it's like anything, is people want to be part of something. So it's very tribal, and there is definitely something about getting together with your mates and singing and having a common goal that you want to achieve. So the football teams are an absolute vehicle for that, which suits. And then I suppose with the history of the clubs and the history in Scotland, of Celtic being predominantly Catholic and Rangers being predominantly Protestant, just adds the fuel to it and gives it the kind of perfect vehicle essentially for it. And it becomes the tit for tat, starts off with wee tiny things, and then it grows into something huge. And I suppose that's the whole point of the show, and why it's really important, and showing you. I mean, we've done workshops and stuff over the years with Nil by Mouth and various different anti-sectarian organisations, and unfortunately over the history, and probably there'll be many to come, that people lose their lives over these sort of things. We went to Northern Ireland and as three young guys from Glasgow, thinking we knew a thing or two about sectarianism because we grew up in Glasgow. When we went to Northern Ireland, we couldn't believe the peace wall, kind of was there. And when we spoke to some of the people there, they would say the peace wall, the gates get closed 4 times a year. Do you know when? And I was thinking, well, probably Christmas, maybe New Year. And they revealed to us that the 4 times a year are when Rangers play Celtic or Celtic play Rangers. Decide how you want to frame that one. But the dividing wall gets locked, and you can't go from one community to another 4 times a year when a football game takes place in a different country is a bit mad. And what we realised when we went to Northern Ireland with the show, generally we were worried we didn't want to upset the peace process, that had been kind of agreed when we were going over with the show. But what the feedback we got from people was they were laughing, going, we're watching 2 Glaswegians going, what's it got to do with yous? And what we learned as well as a cast was people in Northern Ireland have had to live with the consequences of sectarianism. In Scotland, there's such a thing as kind of like on the day of that match that not so much it's accepted, but people, the tribes get together either side of the city, and they as I said to you, they get tribal. They get all their venom and the blood pumping and everything, and they sing and they say things, and the next day they would never repeat in the workplaces. But for that 90 minutes or whatever, that tribal, that belonging to something, kind of that kicks in, that animalistic instinct to be part of the pack kicks in for either side.
And what about you, Scott? Were you raised in a religious family? Did you have a religious upbringing, or?
No, I never had. I never grew up with a father in our household, and my mum was busy working multiple jobs to just keep us fed and clothed. So there wasn't like an allegiance or a family side that went to. If I'm being honest, I don't even know that if I think my older brother picked Celtic as his team, and I think I was 2 years younger, and I think a bit of me picked Rangers just to be the annoying little brother. I don't think there was anything in that at all. And then as I got to grow older, kind of like some of your friends would maybe go to the football, or I was fortunate enough to get a free ticket to go to one of the games, and that happened to be at Ibrox. I've never been what you call like a supporter that goes to the games. I've not grew up in a household that went to the matches. We never had disposable income, but I've always enjoyed watching the football and cheering on the teams. And I remember I kind of grew up, as a kind of a Rangers supporter growing up in the years of 9 in a row and stuff. And I always remember watching one of the VHSs at the time. It was Brian Laudrup, the Danish superstar that played for Rangers. Essentially, he said when he was kind of asked about it, he said, "Well, what do you think?" And he says, "I love football, and when it gets anything more than that, it's not for me."
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I could kind of identify that because I've got mates that were mates from both sides. Kind of my older brother. I was the godfather at the communion of the kids, and I remember going up to the minister and I didn't know what to do. I said, "Sorry, I don't know what I'm doing. I've never been here before." And the minister would let me know in no uncertain terms that I should have known what I was doing, and I should have been to the chapel before then. So yeah, but I never kind of grew up with any steer, if that makes sense. And to be honest, to this day, I'm more. I love watching football. I watch a lot of the English football as well, but I certainly don't hold any of the views that are portrayed in the show. Are very much me taking on the role of Billy, the character. There's and a lot of times in life there's a bit of you in every part that you play because you're bearing your soul. So there's evidently a bit of any actor in any part. But I mean, I'm very much for coming together. That's why I love the play. I like the fact that the guys can put their differences aside for a greater good.
Has the dialogue changed in any way over the years?
Yeah, loads. Obviously, all the players from 13 years ago are long gone. The managers are long gone. But ultimately, the arc of the story is so. It could be a big compliment to Des. I would say it's perfect. It's an absolute perfectly written. But I'm saying perfectly written. I've been involved with the show for 20 years. Des had it in a drawer for 12 years before I ever seen it. So it's been 30 years in the making, this piece of award-winning theatre that we've got. And it gets updated with daily. If something happens today with a transfer news, the cast are in a WhatsApp group saying, need to change that wee bit and make that wee bit. But ultimately, the story is the two guys get locked up, and they have to overcome their differences to support the turnkey. And it's got all the hilarity and stuff of there being a live football match going on while the guys are in the cell. So it's great fun. It's great fun to be in, and it's great to see. We've played to 3,000 people at the SECC. That's the energy coming off a crowd that big when they're laughing. You feel the wave of laughter. It's as close to being a stand-up comedian with the big crowds as you'll ever get, I think.
Can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And you've your career's pretty extensive, Scott, isn't it? What When did you know you wanted to be an actor? Were you a really young kid, or was it?
I'd say this is where, I mean, I've done various projects over the year. Actually, I did a project in a church, and one of the things. So I'm coming from a theatre background. I was kind of working in a church as doing an arts project with them, and I was kind of saying, now the theatre's kind of stole your gig. I said, you were doing spoken word, you were doing singing, you were doing coming together as a congregation, spoken word. Everything's all there. The magic's the same thing. The theatre took it, put a spin on it, and even the communions, you've got your bread and wine. The theatres are selling their wine as well. But yeah, I think I look at it as storytelling. Even at acting's, it's not a word I use to describe myself. I see myself as a storyteller, and I think it's ingrained in everybody. I think if you gave anybody in the world 10, 15 minutes of your undivided attention, what a story they could tell you.
Yeah.
And then it's a matter of picking the right stories for the right storytellers. So that's why I take no offence at all when I go into an audition and I'm not cast. I trust a higher power that those roles are allocated for the right person. So I go in and I can be relaxed, and it's like I don't even need to desperately want the role. I just know that if I'm the right person to tell this story, then I'll be chosen, or I've already been chosen. So I kind of look at it as a storytelling. But so, and my point being there, sorry, was we grow up. Everything we learn through storytelling, and everything we do, we end up we tell stories as we grow old, and our kids, we're the storytellers in their life that educate them. So then to go on the stage, all you're doing is you're taking on board somebody else's story, and you're telling their story. And I absolutely love it. I look at it's a very spiritual experience, being on the stage and taking on somebody else's worries and their trials and tribulations for the period of it. And it's a blessing.
Yeah. Was there anybody who really inspired you as a young guy as an actor? I went to school with a couple of famous actors. We weren't friends, but they were at the same school. One was John Sim, and the other guy was Lee Ingleby. And they in interviews have talked about this guy who was called Brian Wellock, who was quite a gregarious, really colourful drama teacher. And we all thought the world of him because it was just fabulous. Was there anybody in your early days, Scott, that you could perhaps liken to Mr. Wellock?
Yeah, I mean, but my drama teacher at High School was Mr. Roy, so David Roy. He now lives in Australia, and as part of some of uni studies, I read some papers that he'd written, which was quite interesting. So he was my drama teacher. But I think ultimately going back to the storytelling aspect of, I grew up watching Billy Connolly, who's one of the greatest storytellers of our time. And that I kind of watched that kind of stuff, and I love how he's telling stories, making people laugh, coming together, and also overcoming a lot of things as well. Because Billy used humour to bring people together as well. So yeah, I would say that's the ultimate storyteller. And also there's another kind of speaker that this was in my 20s. I kind of discovered a man called Wayne Dyer. Wayne Dyer's a kind of a spiritualist or a motivational speaker from America. And I used to listen on my night shift to Wayne Dyer, and he had a very different outlook to life to anyone I'd ever met. And I think it was unique to probably my background. I don't think anything I'm about to say just now would be unique to maybe anybody watching or listening. But Wayne Dyer was the first person I chatted about that you don't fail at anything, you produce a result. And I was like, I wonder what he's meaning with that. And then he gave the example of you put a golf ball on a golf tee and you swing and you miss. You haven't failed. You produced a result. It's what you do with that result. Do you decide now, there's no point in me swinging here because I'll never hit anything, and you give up and you go and do something else? Or do you keep swinging until you hit the ball and it goes through a window? And then you haven't failed either. Just get another result. And now what you're going to do is keep trying to hit the ball now and stop going through people's windows with the ball until eventually you get to the stage where you're potting, you're getting the golf ball in the hole. And nobody'd ever, like, I always thought, if I couldn't win the 100-meter race, I'd know how to run it.
Yeah, I think
the point running from second.
Yeah,
I'd never met anybody that thought that way. And you're not competing against anybody else. You're competing against yourself from yesterday. So I'm better today than I was yesterday. So the idea of the analogy now is I like to think I'm a teacher and stuff. I teach workshops and stuff in drama. I wish now if I was in a high school doing teaching me, trying to get me to do the 100 meters when I think I'm the second fastest, I'm not doing it. I would put on the board. I'd get everybody to run the 100 meters. I'd time everyone. I'd give them their time, and in a month's time, I'd run the 100 meters again, and the leaderboard would be on improvement. So you might have wee George who ran it in 20 seconds, and everybody was laughing at him. because he was the slowest. And then next month, he's knocked 5 seconds off his time. So he's above Usain Bolt, because Usain Bolt can't improve. He's stuck with the world records. He's at the bottom of the pile. Everybody else is improving. And that's how I look at things, because that means that everybody can improve, essentially, and get better and better, as opposed to at the moment, the leadership board would be, he's number 1, you're number 2. Well, I don't want to be number 2, so I'm not doing it.
Yeah, it's really interesting listening to you talk, Scott, because I'm very blessed that, shameless plug-in, I've published a book. It was by HarperCollins.
Hold it steady so we can see it. Hold it steady.
It's called Our Daily Bread from August to the Altar, and it's been a joy, that, because of the responses that people write to you and tell you, and the feedback that you get. So the side of the storytelling it absolutely resonates with me. But then also, I come from a retail background. The book's called From August to the Altar. I worked for August for 20 years, and a lot of the improvements that the company tried to get out of their managers was through storytelling. Quite often they would have an actor or a musician or a sports person talking about some of those very fine, subtle differences, but from day to day to day to day. And I remember some the swimmer Adrian Morehouse tells a similar story to what you've just described about those small improvements. So it really does resonate me with this, what you've been talking about. But then of course, Scott, you go on and have you appear in some really big stuff, don't you? I mean, where was your big break, Scott, in the acting world?
It's so difficult to watch a big break, because what does it say? It takes 20 years to become an overnight success. My first big break was meeting my now wife. When I was 16 years old. Because at the age of 21, she said, "Why don't you go to college and do college?" And then I went to do acting at college. I didn't even know what a monologue was. So my next big break was when the college lecturers, I don't know if they took pity on me, and they let this kid that had turned up without a monologue, without an audition piece, to an acting course, and they let me on the course. And then finding the play is another break. Having my college lecturer helping us produce the show and coming on the tourways, and then obviously we did Billy and Tim for 5 years. I won the stage best actor award, and then I got Angel's Share. So probably somebody out there would say that might have been your big break from other people's point of view, doing in the first movie. I got cast by Ken Loach, who's a legendary UK British filmmaker and director, and he cast me in his movie The Angel's Share, and that was a blessing. I think it was another blessing of working with Ken. His style of making movies was very much storytelling. He would give you a scenario and say, right, this is a scenario we're filming today. How do you think? What do you think? How do you think this would unfold? And he was asking for your input into the script, and he was asking for your ideas. And I really felt like you were making a movie with Ken Loach. There's been other times I've been on projects, and you are definitely a hired hand to do a job that somebody's decided, and this is how we want it said, this is how we want it done. With Ken, it was like, let's try all different ways. And then before he would wrap and say we're locking that off, he'd say, do you want to have another one? And just go with whatever feels. And I love that freedom to go, right, I can, they might not use it, but at least I felt that all my ideas and stuff were let out. I got a chance to show all I was capable of. And in the editing suite, they can decide what they want to use. From there, it was a very different project. I went and did Kajaki, which is a British war movie. So it was by the producers of The King's Speech, so Academy Award winners. And it was the story of British paratroopers trapped in a minefield in Afghanistan. And I played a real person in Stu Pearson. And that was a different thing, because I was phoning Stu the night before the movie, filming the next day, to say, this is what I've got in front of me as a script. Is that accurate? Is that right? This is what I'm thinking of doing. Is that okay? Is that what you think? And then after that, I would phone him and say, this is what I was allowed to do. This is what I did. I don't know if they'll use it, but I tried to stay as true to what you told me as I could. And then you go into Outlander, and it's different. That's probably the biggest thing, one of the biggest American TV shows in the world. And I went in on season 2. So they've already been doing it for a year, maybe 2 years. So all the relationships have been formulated and stuff like that. So it was a case of kind of going in and trying to get on with everybody, be liked, and get invited back. So I mean, they've all been wonderful experiences. So I don't know if there's one big moment, because I'm in a constant journey. Getting the play back, taking back the Billy and Tim show after 13 years is another break. And there's been tough times as well. There's been times you don't get things, and sometimes that's a break that you don't see at the time. Losing the play was a break. I mean, the opening, I'm a bit like you, Alex. I've been writing a book for 5 years, and the opening chapter of the book is the night I lost the play. I opened the book by saying I built the biggest show in Scotland on the back of a bag of leaflets in my back, and I leafleted the whole of Scotland until we filled every theatre we played, and we built the biggest show in Scotland. And because I wasn't a great businessman and I was naive, I didn't get a long-term written contract in place for the show, and therefore I lost my business one night, just one night, when the writer decided, right, the rights have expired, I'm going to do it myself now. But at the time, it didn't feel like a break. It didn't feel like it was a positive thing. But joining the dots, looking back, it was perfect. And now, getting the show back, when I started writing the book 5 years ago, I had no idea I was going to get the playback. So I wrote the first chapter, not knowing that the last chapter was going to be getting the show back.
Yeah.
So I've got a perfect bookend to the story and a perfect arc that I had no idea was going to be when you started on the adventure. And I think that's a metaphor for life, isn't it? Sometimes you end up back somewhere and you've grown. Was it The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho? You end up back where you started, and you've the purpose was you had to go through it to learn.
Yeah, I've been having some quite philosophical chats with my brother about joining all the dots up in your life, and it's quite interesting, isn't it? Just talking about Kajaki, Scott. I mean, I don't watch a huge amount of films, but that is a film that, it blew me away, literally. I mean, no of course. It was really intense. Was it as intense to make it as it was to watch it?
Yeah, we were in the desert for 6 weeks, and the project is a fascinating project. Paul Catus and Pucker Films, who made it, hats off to them. Anybody making a movie, it's a huge project, and they scripted, scraped, and begged and borrowed to get that movie made. That's an incredible story itself. But the MOD and stuff had agreed to sign up to lend Chinook helicopters and stuff that you just couldn't get the budget for. You're not going to find the money for some of the stuff that we were getting free of charge. And then in the run up to the movie, I don't know if they've seen the script, and that there was a court case and all that involved in everything that went on with the real story. And I think they just maybe decided not to be involved anymore. So the production kept getting delayed. So when we went there, we were under a bit of time pressure to get it done. And also, it's a real story. You're representing someone who's going to watch that and be immortalized on the screen to all their friends and family. And the last thing you'd want to do is, the way probably Scottish folk, people say, "Oh, I've seen Braveheart," and they go, "But that's not the real story. That's not accurate. That's Hollywooded." We wouldn't have wanted any of the guys involved in the real incidents to have to explain to MD they met that, "Oh no, that they did no, that's not what happened. That was just Hollywood." So there was a real pressure on us to get it right, and thankfully, Stu Pearson, who I played, and all the other guys that were involved in the incident that we spoke to, said it was 99.9%. You couldn't. I mean, they when I was sending them pictures of the wadi that the Jordanian military had built for us, they were going, "Is that actual reference photos from the original sites?" And I'm going, "No, this is what they've made. It's phenomenal." So yeah, it was a huge pressure, thoroughly rewarding at the end of it when you're sitting in the cinema with the friends and family and loved ones. And David Elliott, who played the lead in it, he played Corporal Mark Wright, who sadly lost his life in the events that took place on that day. He won the Scottish BAFTA for his role, and he pipped David Tennant and Robert Carlyle to the BAFTA. So that was really a nice icing on the cake, because David had the lead role in a movie, but the toughest role in the sense that I could speak to Stu Pearson, who I was playing, and I could ask him certain things, and I could even have a bit of banter. But the banter I would have with Stu, I'd say, "Look, Stu, if you see the movie and you think that you're not very good in it, I want you to know that I've won awards for acting. So it's just that you're a bad paratrooper because I'm a really good actor, right?" You could have a laugh. And genuinely though, Alex, that was taking the pressure and stuff off of me a wee bit. And but David didn't have that with Mark, because Mark lost his life. So David had to speak to Mark's fiance, and he had to speak to Mark's mum and dad and stuff. And when we went to the night out, we're all meeting each other like a first date. I was getting to meet Stu for the first time. David didn't have his guy there physically. I'm sure he was there spiritually, but he wasn't there physically. And it was really nice that David won the BAFTA for it, because it was a huge responsibility and the weight of not just the men that were in Mark's family first and foremost, but the men that were in the Wadi that day, then the paratrooper regiment, then the British military in general. It was a huge responsibility on getting that right. And I think David felt that on his shoulders as the lead in it, and he was fantastic off and on camera. It was fantastic in bringing everyone together.
And when you do these parts, Scott, do they stay with you? I mean, after Kajaki, for example, was there, and you go home and you put your feet up for a little rest? Do you think, my goodness, do you think about war? Do you think about the effects of war? You know, just explain that, what it's like for an actor.
Yeah, but well, as I said earlier on, there's a bit of your soul in every part you play, right? Because really, it's about taking the mask off. To me, acting's taking the mask off and bearing a bit of your soul in there. Because people watch it and they want to believe it. So therefore, you have to put yourself in those circumstances. So and as much as I could be, I was in that minefield. It was my leg that got blown off when I stood on the mine, as much as it could be. And I said that to Stu. We used to chat, and I said nobody knows what the men went through that day, right? Nobody other than the guys that were there. But we did 6 weeks of recreating that day, so we're as close a second as anyone will ever get. And there was moments when I was lying on the desert floor, thinking, you know, my foot was buried in the soil, and I had a kind of prosthetic leg on, and I was there for maybe 8 or 10 hours with the sun burning me while we filmed Run About Me. And I'm thinking, Stu was here for real. You know, he was bleeding out. He didn't have the luxury of ice water and umbrellas in a 5-star hotel. No. He was fighting for his life, you know. I don't mean fighting his life with shooting weapons or anything. There was no not shot fired in Kajaki. It was about fighting for your life to survive till the rescuers came. Trying to stay conscious, trying to support your mates. So yeah, I mean, and outside of it, I jumped out an aeroplane with Stu to raise money for his prosthetic leg. And he took great pleasure in telling me, as a paratrooper, he's broke his ankles, various ankles, before he lost one of them with the landing. And I'm like, oh, thanks. You know, now he tells me that was in the way up in the plane. He was telling me that, because if you don't lift your legs right in the landing, you can break your ankles when you're coming off the parachute jump. So stuff like that, I'll live with me forever. Yeah. And the bond we have with the guys from the movie. I mean, they're all coming to see the show in London. They're coming to see my show. Sunday night in London sold out, and it's pretty much the whole Kajaki cast, the crew, the producers, the directors. So it's like a VIP night.
That'd be lovely.
For all my pals.
That'd be great for you, wouldn't it? It'd be great to see them all. Yeah. And I've loved chatting to you, Scott. But you said earlier about you teach people, and you know, I'm not I don't think of myself as very academic. I've always been a creative kind of person. And I'm just wondering what you think about, you know, the way of education of the arts, as it were. You know, I think, you know, I see music not as important as it seems to have been once upon a time in schools, for example. And I wonder if that applies to things like drama. You know, most people aren't going to have the success that you've enjoyed. But that doesn't mean it's not a good thing, right? I mean, it's a very important thing, isn't it? Just say how you educate some of our young people in learning about acting and drama.
Well, can I mention earlier on, to me, a big part of when I go and perform is I go and I meditate first and foremost, and I get my mind quiet. I ask a higher power to make me an instrument. You know, make me an instrument, give me all the lessons I'm going to learn. Even my mantra is kind of thank you. So I say thank you, thank you, thank you. How may I serve? How may I serve this audience? How may I serve my castmates? And I walk out of that stage and I turn it over to a higher power and trust that whatever's going to happen was meant to happen. And even the nights that things go wrong, I know going out there that if they're going to go wrong, I'm grateful for the lessons I'm going to get. And I think when you turn it over like that to something higher than yourself, it takes the pressure off you. Also lets go of any ego you've got, because you're going, whether it's great or it's not great, it's great. It's bigger than you are. So I kind of start from there, and if you can kind of clear your mind of the ego and everything else, and go back to the storytelling around the campfire. We used to, you know, it's a human necessity to share stories. We used to sit around, you know, cavemen and women sat around the fire, and the storytellers would tell a story. And then it grew and evolved into using costumes and all different things. And then we invented, obviously, the radio, then the TV, and now people sit and binge Netflix. Yeah. To me, it's still the magical thing of sharing stories. And I think anybody can do that. And that's what I mean. I don't label it as a success or this or that. I've played the roles I was meant to be. Hopefully there's more ahead of me, and if there's not, I'm okay with that as well. But there's a role out there for everyone. You found this through the podcast. You're spreading a message and stories through the podcast, so everybody can do it in a different way, shape or form. And I think the big thing is not to attach an outcome to it. Don't think that being an Outlander that's the goal, or being in a movie or being anything. Just if you've got an audience and you can tell a story, you're successful. Then that's because that's what storytelling is. You know, I've sat here and told many stories to you. I tell stories to the kids. I tell stories in the classes. Because that's you are a storyteller. Everyone's a storyteller, and I think everyone's got a great story.
Yeah, and it's so diverse, isn't it? I was thinking when you said before about Billy Connolly. Jasper Carrot was my storyteller. You know, I just thought he was so funny. But I mean, I'm 54, and I've only recently discovered some. I went to see Romeo and Juliet by Shakespeare, and I was in floods of tears. And that is the diversity of storytelling, isn't it?
Well, I was lucky enough. I went to Milan and I played Romeo in Romeo and Juliet in Italy for 6 weeks at the Piccolo Theatre in Milan, and it was my. I went to college for 3 years, and in those 6 weeks, I think I got the best training ever from the Italians. Harsh lessons at some points because they're all athletes and they're all very, very fit. And the director said British actors don't move. That was the note that the British. It was a bilingual cast, so there was Italian actors and British actors, and she said you don't move. You act with your voice. You just use your voice. You don't actually physically move. And also the Italians are very expressive, so I learned loads there. But one of the things that I went over and I was playing the romantic Romeo. Oh, but soft, what lights are you on the breaks? And she said to me, Romeo's in a gang, Scott, right? And that's why you're cast. She said, Romeo murders somebody in the story, and he's a young man full of testosterone, and maybe he's been drinking or anything else. He says, and when he climbs over that wall and he goes into that balcony and he sees Juliet on that balcony, he is going there to take the prize. He is going there to get, well, he sees what he wants and he's off. And the only reason that nothing happens that night is because Juliet's so strong and she talks him down. And I was like, wow, that's a very different take on anything I'd ever heard about Romeo and Juliet. And it really affected how it was played. So you had Romeo, the young man full of testosterone, going in and going, right, I like what I see, and I'm gonna get it. And Juliet was having to go, well, if you're serious and you really like me, and come back tomorrow when you're sober, come back tomorrow and we'll get married. You know, kind of that really changed the dynamic of how that was played, and it's an incredible story. And going back to what I said about Billy and Tim, could be Montague Capulet in that prison cell. You know, it could be Romeo and Tybalt.
Yeah,
they're locked together.
Yeah,
to sort it out, and Juliet's a way to raise to pay the fines. So universal. I mean, Romeo and Juliet will be there forever because it's a story that everybody can identify with. You know, we've all fell in love and head over heels with somebody at some point. And the same situation I say with Billy and Tim. There's everybody's in a rivalry. It could be your brother, it could be a family member. At some point you've had somebody and you go, I can't stand that person. Well, that's Billy and Tim's that. And then you have to, come together and grow up a wee bit as you go through the life.
Yeah. Scott, it's been really lovely chatting to you. You're a top guy, and now I need to go online and just find out where if you're coming to Manchester or somewhere. I mean, you must be, right?
We're coming to Stockport's the nearest.
All right. Well, I'm going to go on and see if I can get myself a ticket and come along and see it and wish you really well. I know you've been promoting it and ticket sales are going well, so it's going to be a busy year for you. And then we kick off in April. We've got our first Scottish shows, kind of one of our warm-up shows at Glasford Community Hall, and then we're off to London for 2 weeks. We've got Belfast already, so it's going to be very busy. I think we're on until October 2025, so I'm very busy at the weekends for the next 2 years. Oh, well, good luck with it, Scott. Thanks ever so much for coming on the Godcast. And if anybody else, hopefully people have enjoyed this chat and checking out. There's over 170 odd interviews with people from faith, people with no faith, musicians, authors, actors, politicians, something for everybody. So, Scott, for now, thanks so much for coming on the Godcast. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you very much for having me.